But we're going to start, hopefully, getting you ready for Christmas, because today it's about the science of Santa. So, welcome. Hope you have an enjoyable afternoon with us. I'm sure we will enjoy your company. So, over to Steve.
All right, thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me back. Now, those of you who have seen the kitchen chemistry might recognise one or two of the things that I'm going to do, but I'm going to put a different spin on them today. I'm also going to get my excuses in early. This talk, if I were giving it at a university, I would have cryogenics with me, so I'd have some solid carbon dioxide, I'd have some liquid nitrogen, and I'm going to have to try and work around that. A little difficult sometimes. The point is, I'm not allowed to transport it in my car. Not even with all the windows open, not even with a special device that I've built to transport this stuff safely. The rules are such that it can't be done. I need either a flatbed truck where the stuff's outside so I don't get asphyxiated on the way. So I'm sorry that I can't do that. But I'm going to try to do just about everything else for you today. Now, this originated some years ago. A friend of mine, Maxine Rushton, came to me and said, I teach primary school, and what I'd like to do is sort of get them thinking about science using stories. And it was coming up to the Christmas lecture. Actually, that should be hidden. It should be the next slide I'm showing. Something's gone wrong. Anyway, this is the title slide for the Christmas lecture 2014. And so what Maxine did was come along to me and said, okay, what we'd like to do, or what I'd like to do is do some demos, some demonstrations to link to the Christmas or the Santa story to get the children at the primary school thinking about Santa and thinking about science and whether what we attribute to Santa is magic, is actually science, and things and these sorts of things. And this is what I'm going to show you today. So all these various bottles and kettles and goodness knows what is enabled this. Now I'm going to do some chemistry. Although it says physics here, physics is a relatively new venture at UEA, and that's where I'm from, University of East Anglia, up in Norwich. I'm going to do some chemistry, so I'm going to put on my chemist's apron. This is the sort of kitchen chemistry in some ways. Thank you very much. So I'm going to put on my chemistry apron, so I'm protected. And the other thing we need to do, you probably don't do this when you're in the kitchen, although sometimes when I'm frying stuff, I think it might be a good idea. We have the safety spectacles. So, should be ready to go. Now, somewhere here I have a mouse, and if it's been turned on, it might even do this for me. Yes. So, the start of the Santa story is writing a letter to Santa. Do you remember doing that?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember doing that, and then something special happened to the letter that meant that it apparently ended up at the North Pole. Now, I didn't know what my parents did to the letter, but it involved an element of burning. So the question is, why does my letter to Santa not burn? Why can Santa read that? So I've got a piece of writing paper here, and I'm going to write a message to Santa on it. So this is what I can do. I should be able to do this and go over to here. And with luck, you will see. So that's all I want for Christmas. It's not you. So all I want for Christmas is my two front teeth. Now what what happens to this letter is that, let me switch that back. What happens to this letter is you get the burning mixture. You can see this is a recognisable burning mixture. I hope you recognise purple as something that will burn. And we will pop that in the mixture. Now, first thing to assure you is that the writing has not disappeared. You can still, some of you can still see the writing. It's not dissolved off. And so what we're just going to do is light that piece of paper, and you see it stays whole. So this is obviously what your parents did to keep the letter whole. And now what I'm going to do is just try to dry that off, because why it didn't burn was because I wasn't using methylated spirits. Well, I was using methylated spirits. I wasn't using all methylated spirits. Half of that mixture was water. And water is amazing stuff. It can absorb lots and lots and lots of heat. And so the methylated spirit was busy burning, and the water was keeping the paper at a low enough temperature that it didn't ignite. Now there is, in common knowledge, supposedly, people tend to know the ignition temperature of paper. Anyone know the ignition temperature of paper?
454.
All close, it's the book title. In Fahrenheit.
No, 451.
451. Fahrenheit 451, exactly. That's supposedly the... that's why I came back there. Supposedly the ignition temperature of paper. Now, the thing is, at the North Pole, it's very, very cold. Is it not? Has anyone been to the North Pole? No, it's possible, and people do go. Or South Pole? Anyone? No? Okay, so I'm trying to get this paper dry, because what I'm going to try to do is get that writing back, because the writing's disappeared. See the writing's disappeared? It's gone. And it's not on the other side either. You all agree the writing's gone? Well, let's try and get it back. What I'm doing is making this paper very cold, and it sometimes even works. It's, you see, this is where liquid nitrogen comes in. I put in liquid nitrogen for a couple of minutes, and it just happens. This, I need to, it's very minty. I like mint, don't get me wrong, it's just very minty. It's not getting cold enough today. But the point is, if it were getting cold enough, you would see the writing come back. So it's obviously not as cold using that spray as it is at the North Pole. I think that's a hypothesis that we can draw. So that at least you saw your letter stay whole, even though we didn't manage quite to get it cold enough to get the writing back. I'll try again a little later when it's dried off and see if we can get that. Now, of course, the presents we get tend to arrive with lots of packaging. Has anyone had an Amazon parcel recently? You get a very, very big box with a very small product in it and lots of packaging. Now, obviously Santa uses packaging to get the presents to where they need to go, but he's got elves working at the North Pole, and stuff must be delivered to him to produce it, because there's nothing at the North Pole. So you've got to get raw materials there, and they've got to come in packaging. And so polystyrene packaging is arriving at the North Pole, and one hypothesis is that's why the North Pole is white. But what we would see if that were the case is that the North Pole would be getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because every year there'd be more polystyrene packaging, and if it were the polystyrene packaging that makes the North Pole white, then we would find that the amount increases every year. So Santa has to do something with polystyrene packaging. And one thing we might suggest he does is take material like this. This is some acetone. Now, gentlemen, if you've ever used nail polish remover, you will recognise the smell of acetone. And so if we pop our polystyrene in our acetone, what we find is we can get rid of it. And don't ask me what he does with that now. But at least it's a lower volume to get rid of. Much lower volumes. Still not bad. Okay, where are we? What's the next thing we're going to talk about? Oh, the presents. Okay, the elves have unpacked stuff, the raw materials, they've dissolved it in acetone. Well, that's one way of getting rid of it. And now Santa is in his warehouse and he's got to get this stuff into his sleigh. So, question is, how do you fit all these gifts in the sleigh? Unless Santa is going backwards and forwards to the North Pole, which is even more ridiculous than going all the way around the world in one night, how does he get all the presents in his sack? Well, again, this is where the liquid nitrogen comes in. We would normally show you that you take, oh, look at this, a prop that was left from something else. I'll have to sanitize my hands now. We normally take a balloon like this and drop it in some liquid nitrogen and it would shrink. So I'm going to do something a bit similar, but less impressive. What's more impressive was that I managed to empty the bottle at the time. So what I'm doing here is just warming up this bottle. We're going to see another example a bit like this later. But I'm warming up this bottle so that the air is hot inside there. And what I'm going to show you is that that air will contract as it cools down. Let's get the bottle's nice and warm and the air's nice and warm in the bottle. And what we'll do is we'll simply take a balloon and pop it over the neck of the bottle. Now, what's happening inside the bottle is things are cooling down. And you might be aware that as things cool down, they take up less space. There is one obvious exception to the rule. As the people on the Titanic will tell you, no, they won't. They would have been able to tell you had this not been the exception to the rule, and that is water, of course. If you cool water down, ice floats. So as water gets lower and lower temperature around the freezing point, it actually gets less dense, takes up more volume. And you can see here what's happening, I hope. You can see my balloon is slowly being sucked into the bottle because what's happening is this is cooling down. It's not cooling very quickly. What I'm going to do is, I've got a bucket of ice here, and the risk of breaking my gin bottle, I'm going to plunge the bottle into the ice so it cools down much more quickly. Much more quickly. You just can't get the props these days. And so now it's not only very cold, but wet. And that balloon has been sucked right inside the bottle. And that's the sort of thing that you might put forward for Santa getting all the gifts in his sack. Now the other thing, if you do this with cryogenics, so stuff that's very, very cold, like liquid nitrogen, what you find is they turn out to be very brittle. And that's another fun thing that I get to do if I have liquid nitrogen with people like, oh. Ah, yes. I was thinking, what's the story behind this picture? Yeah, he's got a big sack. And whether he's compressed them by using liquid nitrogen or cold temperatures or what have you, Santa needs to protect the presents. And what I made here was something that you've probably seen me fiddling with this prior to the show. What this is a material called oobleck. Now, some of you may not have heard of oobleck before. I'll tell you what's in it, shall I? Water and corn flour. And if you look up, if you're tech savvy, like my children are, and you look up oobleck on YouTube, you'll find this stuff dancing. Because what it does is, it's what's called a non-Newtonian fluid. And people put it on loudspeakers, put some music through the loudspeaker, and this stuff sort of forms fingers, and it looks really, really weird. So if you fancy an educational experience, you can try looking up oobleck. O-O-B-L-E-K. I think it might be C-K, but I think it's just a K. Anyway, this is this non-Newtonian fluid, and there is a company that uses this technology in protective wear for motorcyclists. Actually, it's probably not quite corn flour and water that they use, but it's exactly the same principle. And what I'm busy doing is making sure the corn flour and water are mixed. And I have a representative present here. I think you'll recognise these. And last time I did this, about 3 years ago now, last time I did this, I didn't get my oobleck mixture quite right, with obvious results. So I'm going to try it now. What I'm going to do is pop the egg in here, and then I'm going to drop it. I'm going to have to do it fairly quickly because the egg will settle through the oobleck. I'm going to try and get this closed so it doesn't make a huge mess on your floor. I'm going to do that later, by the way, so I don't want to start now. So the egg is in there, and let's see what happens to the egg when I simply drop it on the floor. And what we find is it's still an egg with oobleck all over it. Ta-da! I could try it again, just to show you it wasn't a fluke. This is normally where I have two volunteers, you see. One is dropping an egg without the oobleck packaging, and one is dropping the egg with the oobleck packaging. And so what we do is just drop it like that. And what's happening is, if you've ever mixed corn flour and water, you'll know if you try and put your spoon through it very quickly, it hardens up. And if you do it very slowly, it flows around the spoon. That's exactly what's happening here. When you get that impact, things harden up, it cushions everything, and distributes the force of the impact all over the surface of the egg, instead of just at one point that would break it. Now, some of you, I hope, are skeptical scientists, and you are sitting there saying, well, you can get those fake eggs at joke shops. You can indeed get fake eggs at joke shops. But this isn't one of them.
It's not an oob fluke.
Sorry?
It's not an oob fluke.
It's not a fluke, no. And it's not an oob fluke, it's a real egg. So that's what we're going to put forward for Santa, protecting the presents as they go around the world. He'll use the technology that's used for the motorcycle wear. Now this is Santa in his kitchen. he's busy cooking, and this is another experiment that I would have been able to show you had I had some liquid nitrogen. And the question is, how does Santa like his eggs cooked? Now we know that the North Pole is very cold. Okay, it's not as cold as liquid nitrogen, but this is me cooking eggs. That's a frying pan, and that is the steam that you get from liquid nitrogen condensing water in the egg. So that's the clouds of water vapor that you see. The result of that, which again I would have been able to show you had I been able to bring liquid nitrogen with me, is what appears to be fried eggs. You'll see the white has gone white, they're solid, they're actually more like egg ice cream, really, than truly. But the thing is, if you cooked them, if you fried those eggs, what you would have done, the heat in the frying causes chemical reactions that mean that the white of the egg hardens and turns white, but it stays that way because these are chemical reactions. What I've done with the liquid nitrogen is do the same thing. I've made these proteins in that material change shape, and they've hardened because of the temperature, and they've changed shape because of the temperature, so they look white. But if you leave them and let them warm up slowly to room temperature, they will turn into just runny eggs like this, and you could use them for cooking. So they're not fried, but it's a fun thing to do because we usually have liquid nitrogen available. Okay, so Santa is known as being corpulent. Carries a few excess pounds. And we all know this is against health advice these days. So why does Santa do it? Well, there is one very good reason that Santa is so fat. And that's because it's cold at the North Pole. Anyone would think it was cold at the North Pole. Let's go over to my... now, again, this is where I would normally call up some volunteers. Now, that is the temperature of my temperature probe. If I pop it in there, that's the ice water. You'll see it goes down to 0. I just hope I can get this done before the battery does run out. Now, what I'm going to do is put my hand in a glove. And this is that well-known glove that you get from a well-known supermarket. And I'm going to put my temperature probe in my hand, in my glove, and pop it in the ice water. And if we leave it there for a little while, we should see that my hand gets colder. Certainly I feel my hands getting colder. Now, if you do this with children, it's very interesting because it is getting cold and it's even moderately painful already, and you generally have children that will stick it out. They don't want to give up. Apparently, we've even had situations where their lips are turning blue because they don't want to be the first one to take their hand out of the bucket. But you see, again, under the circumstances, I thought I would be the volunteer here because I didn't want necessarily to force people to stand too close to one another under our presentation. And you see, it's getting cold. And really, really, it is unpleasant. So that's about a minute. I've had my hand in there for about a minute. And boy, am I glad to take it out. But, now I've got another glove. This is white. It's lard. This is Santa's insulation. And so if we pop my temperature probe in there, and I put my hand in the glove, in the ice water, we will see that we don't get the same effect. We'll keep it there for another minute to make a comparison. And again, I've talked to people who do this demonstration at sort of science centres, and they get someone to put their hand in a glove in ice water like this, in a glove like this, in ice water like this, and try and keep it there for as long as they can. And they report that most people will take their hand out of the glove because it gets too hot. No, we see it. We've got Santa with his extra layers of insulation. We see it in seals, the blubber, whales, the blubber. They're all animals that need insulation from the cold, and this is a very efficient way of doing it. You'll see that that's my minute up, and you'll see the temperature actually went up during that time rather than going down. Normally we would have 3 people, and the middle one would have a woolen glove that then you put in a plastic bag so it doesn't just get all wet and so on. You see the temperature's going down now for the outside. I can switch that off and say my battery worked. Right, let's switch back to this and see what I've got next. So that's why Santa is so fat. Okay, so I think this is to do with his sleigh. And we see pictures of reindeer portrayed with antlers. Okay, we've got the antlers here. Now that tells me, in fact, that Santa's sleigh, Christmas time, is being pulled by female reindeer. Male reindeer apparently lose their antlers at the beginning of December. So by the end of December, the only reindeer with antlers are the female reindeer. So ladies, you're pulling the sleigh. But even if one did have flying reindeer, well, if one had flying reindeer, I suppose anything's possible. But the question is, how does Santa power his sleigh? How does he get it around the world so quickly? Well, one of the things that he could use would be a form of rocket. And this form of rocket is actually being used in the Bloodhound project. And you may have come across Bloodhound. It's been in the news on and off for many, many years. It was about 5 years ago that they were going to break the land speed record in South Africa, and they're still not quite there, although they have been doing low speed trials. The car has 3 engines. There is a Formula 1 engine, there is a jet engine, and there is a rocket engine. Interestingly enough, the Formula 1 engine is there just to provide power and electrics to the car and not driving the wheels at all. The jet engine and the rocket motor do that. And to power the rocket motor, you need oxygen. And they make it on the fly. And what I'm going to do is show you how one does that and how Santa might do that. The fuel, or the raw material we're using here is stuff called hydrogen peroxide. If you've seen kitchen chemistry, you've seen this one before. And what I'm going to do is just add a little washing up liquid. My bottle It's getting empty. Add a little washing up liquid, because if we make oxygen, because it's a gas, we're going to make some bubbles, and those bubbles will be caught in the washing up liquid. That's all it's there for. It doesn't do anything else. It's just to catch bubbles if we make them. Now, it turns out that you're making hydrogen peroxide in your bodies right now. I would tell you that it's poisonous, but that might put you off. It is indeed poisonous, and you're making it just by breathing. But don't stop breathing, that's probably a bad idea. What you'll find is that your bodies have things called enzymes, and that breaks down the hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen. Yeast has the same enzymes because it breathes just the same way, and so that oxygen is being formed. And formed very quickly. Now that's a process called catalysis. Catalysis is what we use to make chemical reactions go faster than they would normally. So that's what enzymes do. That's why you use enzymes in detergents, or biological detergents, got enzymes in them. But for Santa probably wouldn't use yeast. Okay? Santa would probably use something a lot more powerful that would get the hydrogen peroxide broken down a lot more quickly to give him the oomph that he needs to get his sleigh on the way. So here again, some more female reindeers. None of them apparently by the name of Rudolph, because Rudolph apparently has a red nose. But why does Rudolph have a red nose?
Likes beer.
Now, because his nose is gone, then why don't all the others have red noses? That's the thing. Why is it Rudolph? Now, you might say, well, there is no reason that Rudolph would have a red nose all alone. You might say that Rudolph only has a red nose when he's in front of the sleigh, because he's the first reindeer, and it's the air resistance going through very speedily that's warming up his nose. And I think we're going to leave it there. But Santa, has anyone seen Santa going about his business? Yes, I know, you can go on the web and look up the NORAD Santa thing and you can see where he is around the world, apparently. But no one's ever sighted Santa. And the point is, he manages to keep him and his sleigh invisible. And there is one very, very appealing hypothesis that we can put forward to why the sleigh is invisible. Now, I've got to find somewhere safe to do this. Now, can we all hear that?
Yes.
Very annoying noise. Yeah, we can all hear the very annoying noise. If I do this, I just hope this doesn't fly off and damage the camera. If you listen to the pitch of that, did you hear it going up and down? It's a bit like when an ambulance drives by. Now it's not the fact that this is changing pitch, because it's just giving out that one pitch. It's you appear, or it appears to you to change, because when it's travelling towards you, those sound waves get squashed up, and when it's travelling away from you, the sound waves get stretched out. That's why your Formula 1 car, if you're listening to the Hamilton, it's still not that. If you're listening to Hamilton lose the Grand Prix, you hear and coming up towards the microphone and then down away from it. Same with the ambulance. And so you could imagine that Santa is using this effect, that he's travelling so fast that the light rays, because it happens to light as well, we experience it with sound, it happens to light as well. And this is how astronomers know how far away things are. It's how they know how quickly they're moving away from us or coming towards us. Or the red shift or the blue shift. And you can imagine that Santa goes so fast that the light is shifted so we can't see it anymore. So that is a really appealing way of doing it. There is another way, and what you may not have noticed is that I have had Santa's sleigh on my table the whole of the lecture so far. But you can't see it. It's here. For those of you in black and white, the pink's behind the blue. There's Santa's sleigh. But if I pop it in it disappears. Now you know it's there. If you look really carefully, you will be able to see it. But what what I've done there is I've used a material that has the same refractive index as glass. So the light going through that material, when it hits the glass, it doesn't get changed, the course doesn't get changed. You know, normally you put a stick in some water and the stick looks bent. Yeah? Well, that's because the water has a different refractive index from the air, and so when the light rays come out of the water, they get sent in a different direction than they would normally. Here, the light rays going through that don't experience that, so you don't notice that there's anything in there. Now, it's going to be very, very difficult for Santa to do this for his whole body, and his sleigh, and the reindeer, but that is another way that you might consider rendering yourself invisible. Now, apparently, Santa gains access to our homes through a chimney. So if you're like me, in my house I have no chimney, Santa doesn't call. But if you've got a chimney, we've already said that Santa's fat. And he's carrying a few too many pounds. So how is it that he manages to get down your chimney so efficiently? Well, this is a bit like the balloon case. And I've got a couple of Santas here. These are my Santas. Someone spotted them earlier and I said that was my lunch. I wasn't joking, it is my lunch, but I'm going to have to use it for this demonstration. So, you imagine your house at night. You've kept it warm during the day, and at night it gets to cool down. So, here you have your living room, which is nice and warm. I just hope this water is indeed hot enough. The living room is nice and warm. But over the night, it will tend to cool down. Yes, that's quite funny. It will tend to cool down. So all Santa really has to do, this is actually where being a little larger than life comes in. All Santa has to do is actually sit on your chimney pot. And as the air in your room cools down, because we've all got really well insulated houses these days, triple glazed and goodness knows what, you'll see Santa is actually being drawn in to the room. See, he's starting to get in there. We could do it with the other one as well. And while we're waiting for that one, have a little race. Although this will be an unfair test because the second Santa has got, well, the first Santa has got a big head start. For those of you over there, you can see he's the question is, was it hot enough? Now, obviously, we all get our rooms hot enough because you never found Santa stuck in the chimney. Never found Santa. So they've always been warm enough to get him all the way in. Either that, or there's some sort of safety rope and the reindeer haul him out again, which is probably why he has well-trained reindeer to do this. And you see, I can speed this up by cooling the house down a little more quickly, opening a window. There we go. And Santa is in the house. Now, I did say that was my lunch. And I want to get that out of there. Any suggestions? Sorry?
Suck it very hard.
Suck it out. Actually, that's not such a bad suggestion. What you need to do is blow. Now, if I can, let me try. No, No, it's not coming. Well, you get the idea. Usually I manage to get it out, but I've broken. Santa's broken. And he's neither going out nor in at the moment. But obviously I don't want to break the glass because that will get glass in my lunch. And, but if you pressurize the air sufficiently behind Santa and then get it in the right place and let off your blow at the right time, Santa will pop right out. So that's how we get Santa down the chimney. So Santa is now in your house. How Santa get down the chimney? He's now in your house and he's standing there. He's distributed the presents under the tree and you've left out some beverage of your choice, carrots for reindeer and a mince pie. But I would just like you to imagine for a moment. Santa, he's been around all these houses. He can't drink that much alcohol because he's in charge of a supersonic sleigh. So he's not going to drink the alcohol. He might eat the mince pie, but note we've got a mince pie that's got some icing sugar on it. That's important. It's important that you give Santa mince pies with icing sugar. I will show you why later. But he's just as likely to eat the carrots himself. And the reason is carrots and stuff like that is going to contain vitamin C. And you just imagine his stomach after eating all those mince pies, all that stuff. What it's going to look like is this. And I'm just going to make a fake Santa stomach here. So there's a bit of iodine in there, and I'll put this in, and what we'll see, this is what Santa's stomach looks like. It feels horrible because of all this heavy food. And so occasionally, what he's going to want to do is eat some vitamin C. I have some vitamin C tablets here. Actually, I don't need to use a whole one. I only need to use even a quarter of one. And so if he can jump on the carrot, if he can get it before the reindeer do, then, and of course he's going to take it back up the chimney. The reindeer don't come. Now they're not, well, actually I was going to say they're not as fat as Santa, but it turns out that at this time of year, the males have about 5% body fat because they've been busy rutting, whereas the females have been laying down stores for the winter and they've got about 50% body fat. And given that we know that females are pulling the sleigh, it could be that they would come down the chimney the same way as Santa. Anyway, here's my carrot, and here's my rather painful stomach. And if I put my carrot in my stomach, what we find is that painful stomach clears up. So that is why you give Santa some vitamin C containing edibles, as well as the other stuff. So who eats the carrot? Sometimes it's going to be Santa. Not always, but sometimes it's going to be Santa. And finally, Santa's in the house. You've got. Now I don't want liquid in here because not many people know this, but liquid fuel doesn't burn. It's the gas that burns. Even in a candle. You have your solid wax that gets melted to liquid that gets wicked up the wick, but it's actually candle wax gas that's above the wick that is doing the burning. And what I need to do is, I'm cuddling this because my wife's away and I don't know. You know what they say cuddle a chemist to see the reaction. So I'm just cuddling this to make it warm, so this definitely will work for us. And I think what I'll do is I'll put it over here. This bucket was, there we go, and I'm tipping out the liquid because it's not the liquid we're going to burn. So now watch very carefully to see if anything happens when I do this. That is how Santa gets back up. But occasionally, and just occasionally, Santa wants a tickle. You imagine doing that over a few hours. You want to calm your nerves once in a while. That's where the mince pie with the icing sugar comes in. Because you can do a similar sort of thing with icing sugar. Now, I'm going to do it with corn flour, but you can do this effect with icing. It is far more effective with icing sugar. I've done this once with custard powder, and I did feel the difference. It's quite astonishing. So I do it with corn flour because it's a lot easier to clear up afterwards. For me, because I generally end up clearing this stuff up. So what we need to do is make a cloud of this, and it's going to be like Baltic Mills, we hope. So that's how Santa uses your icing sugar on the mince pie when he's had a tickle. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you've learned now that Santa is really a scientist and not a magician. And it only remains for me, although this does stick in my craw, given that it's only just past Armistice Day, Merry Christmas!
Series of talks for this year. I think that anyone else that comes to follow are going to have a very hard act. So thank you once again, Stephen, for highly entertaining, well, over 3/4 of an hour this afternoon. I'm quite sure every single one of us have thoroughly enjoyed that, learnt a lot along the way, and it will certainly add some laughter to our Christmas, I imagine, when we start remembering these things as we share Christmas with our families. So I'd like us to give a round of applause to Stephen once again.